The Seinfeld episode The Masseuse features a plot where Elaine attempts to get her boyfriend to change his name from Joel Refkin, you know, like the controversial New York serial killer, into something different, including the suggestion for the very uncontroversial name of OJ, which to this day has no relevancy to anyone who has killed anyone ever in any particularly famous way. You get it. Some jokes and episodes from sitcoms, sometimes the entire Happy Meal with cute little toy included, age badly. Something about them that was completely innocent in the past is now disturbing or puts off modern audiences, and there's for sure no small amount of infamous episodes that have become so creepy and offensive that simply watching them has become a little bit of a challenge. One that happens to be oddly rewarding, however. So, let's talk about sitcom episodes that have aged horribly, and why that can be a good thing. Friends' approach to discussing a specific transgender character is an often scrutinized aspect of the show, which isn't positively otherwise besides the fact that the character's living conditions, which were already a stretch of the imagination, are now downright depressing for newer audiences to deal with. How the hell did some coffee shop attendants afford this sort of apartment with large floor plan and scenic balcony views? You know, I've talked about the housing crisis for the past 3 videos, and I think there's an underlying issue here that I should probably discuss with my therapist. But really, that's not much of an issue if you just suspend your disbelief a little, something you can't really do with the character of Charles Bink, Chandler's father, who is so fundamentally hard to discuss because the show began at a time where the separation between someone who is transgender and someone who dresses in drag wasn't normally set straight. I know, with wording depending on the situation. But under the show's release context, I think the ideas and discussion of the topic were likely even considered progressive at a time rather than anything malicious by the writers. Drag is honestly a pretty exotic topic to discuss with someone who is unfamiliar with it, to the point where jokes about it can be genuinely funny if they weren't written in the expense of the people who drag. Seriously, stop talking, you talk too much! Something sort of similar happens with Will and Grace as a show. It originally displayed an incredible amount of open-mindedness, which is currently diminished to the extent where the show can feel condescending surrounding the comedy writing around Jack, who is so campy his camp level list brings 2 tents in case the first one breaks and 17 cans of mosquito repellent. There's a better understanding now of how varied the personalities of queer people can be, and thus this show's attempts pan out reductive and unsuccessful. Quiz time! Is Nate queer or is he not? Answer in comments, but you won't be told if you're right. These examples, however, are rather boring, bland in a way. It's a topic that is now so popular to discuss on the internet in an attempt to demonstrate or validate the negative or positive effects of liberal ideas depending on your point of view. These topics being so controversial naturally drive clicks, and discussion is therefore very well developed from basically any perspective you want to see it on. I don't want to talk about these examples because I can read your mind and I know you've heard them ad nauseam. You're currently having a very disturbing thought. I need a moment to think about this. If I keep this up, I might momentarily turn into a 90s instant message. Let's get serious. Let's talk about things that are played off like funny haha situations, but they are holy shit, this laugh track is more terrifying than half the shit Lovecraft ever wrote situations. We're going back to a show that you probably didn't know, but I'm not about to paint a pretty picture of it for sure. Let's talk about the Bicycle Man from Diff'rent Strokes. Who named this show? Did they just run out of ink for the first hour? This episode is not at all made in bad faith. It's a 2-episode special that dedicates a large portion of itself to explain what kids should look out for and how parents should react. It's just that being a sitcom, it often makes some jokes that don't exactly go down easy. What's the situation? Well, child molestation and predation! Yippee!
You don't have any clothes on either.
Yeah, this episode involves the kids, Dudley and Arnold, doing increasingly disturbing favors for their friendly neighbor bicycle salesman, who lures them into the back room of his store with ice cream and pizza, shows them inappropriate magazines and pictures that include him and other children naked, pressures them into drinking alcohol, and later takes pictures of them shirtless. Probably things that pre-internet predators would do, but what's really disturbing is that it's almost entirely played for laughs until the last minutes of the 2nd episode, which serve to really talk about the issue seriously after they catch the guy in the act of touching Dudley after drugging him. If this weren't a sitcom, that child would be traumatized for life. Do I need to explain why this aged badly? It's a 2-part special talking about an issue that has a completely different environment in the modern day, and plays it off far too casually to the point where the kids seem in less danger than they actually are. Even if the show does a good job at explaining and instructing on the situation, it feels like a relic of its era. One of my favorite details is how Mr. Horton shows the kids a furry porn tape about mice, and one of the kids is getting really into it, which, besides making me feel bad for furries at the time, considering how amusingly talented furries are in the modern day, seems like a really peculiar detail, more so because they take the time to clarify that predators and gays are different concepts. For a 1980s show that's relatively progressive, and yet, nope, we're not fucking with Felix the Cat! That shit's disgusting! Oh, but the biggest crime is this part where Arnold is chewing on this pizza that is so dry, Mr. Horton is probably serving as much time for having this brand in his house as he did for the molestation and CP possession. easily 3 life sentences. Fuck it, I'd give him 4, he is giving purple v-neck sweaters a bad rep. This offends me personally. I'm saying that there's countless examples of stuff that age badly in sitcoms, but it's only easy to pinpoint the cases where it's an outrageous situation or something that could be understood as offensive in 2024. I stand my posture on a sword. There's not a lot of discussion and focus put on things that age badly in a more peculiar way. I want to focus a little more on stuff that is independent on how much each person tolerates controversial issues and how easily they understand the historical context in which the sitcoms were filmed. Because nothing has aged as badly as sitcoms created during the 40s to 60s, such as I Love Lucy. Oh, we don't believe in color anymore? Cool. Yeah, no, get experimentally colorized. Let's see, woman doing chores in the kitchen right at the start, usage of the word gay in the meaning of happy, husband refers to his wedding as a tragedy, fat shaming, smoking as a positive display, and we're less than 5 minutes in! This show has aged like hot leftovers, probably. I think one of the most retrospectively awkward aspects is the bedroom set. No, basically a prime example of the Hays Code of Conduct enacted during the late 30s, which disallowed the depiction of tons of stuff, such as immoral people with power, the display of other religions, anyone doing crime for sympathetic reasons, and, most comically in this example, having a couple share a single bed. Something which you can notice in this show a lot because the beds drift further apart the more the show progresses. Great, they're now on opposite sides of the globe, awesome! Point is, this show aged in every aspect, from production, themes, sets, to even what was allowed or not allowed on television. And oh boy, this is far from the only example, as the closer you get to the modern day, the more intentional the pitfalls become, until you reach a point where they start feeling closer to a attempt of fate, a purposeful attempt to guess the future and prevent the show from aging too far. I've prepared 3 shows. Dig in. Actually, it's 4 shows, but 2 of them share the same issue and released in the same week. Kinda like me with Sonic Adventure 2 Battle. We released really close together and were only good 30% of the time. Full House was a massive show when it started. No royal flush could stop this bad boy, so eventually advertisers came and knocking on 1709 Broderick Street, and the house was so full only a few people could get in, including a certain mouse with an entire theme pack in his Trojan Horse horse color. There's a 2-part special where the characters of Full House go to Disney World, where the product placement is so blatant and the theme park so different from what it is now to the extent of featuring deprecated rides that the watching experience for those episodes is really unique. The trip is filled with exhibition of Disney World's rides, mood and facility, and the characters have such an easy time it makes Y2K a postmodern RPG seem unscripted. One of my favorite little details is how Michelle just happens to win a raffle that makes her princess for the day and later bosses around the rest of the girls. Why do I like this so much? I'll let you hear it yourself, because it gave me a hearty laugh.
Women who hallucinate in theme parks on the next Oprah.
This is not what I want to point out, but notice this example of a pop culture joke that is probably already dated. I'm getting ahead of myself, but please remember this.
Okay, well, what's next?
Splash Mountain. Carousel again.
Michelle, we've done it 10 times.
Need I say more? By 93, Disney was already having issues with customers complaining over the long queues leading to the creation of the Fast Pass, but I would say if the show didn't go completely out of its way to justify it. They were so desperate to avoid featuring Disney's massive queue issue that they magically let Michelle decide that she won't have to wait in lines, and I think that's beautiful script writing. There's a naivete to considering whether Disney would ever solve this issue, and even if this episode released later than the show's first season, it's clear that the writers were concerned on making the show good for there now. Meanwhile, other shows that started airing would see an acceptance to the fact that they would age. They knowingly leaned into a lot of the times culture in order to create the shows, and nothing screams this harder than character cameos like the ones in Indie Boys Meets World Season 5 episode No Guts, No Corey, where the characters find themselves in World War II again. For starters, there's this recurring bit where Eric is asking Jack to display a picture of him in the foxhole, and everyone ends up looking at him weird as he claims that
They were roommates.
But most importantly, this episode features a grand total of 1 minute and 14 seconds where Salem the cat from Sabrina shows up. They were spoiling us with this collab. What's next? We'll get 2 minutes of Jerry Seinfeld hidden away in the background? At least Frasier's show where Sam shows up actually has Sam from Cheers showing up early, updating the audience on the state of Cheers characters, clarifying that Woody and Kelly's baby is smart as opposed to, oh, that's a big R word! Radioactivism. Point is, he stays, but being frank, I couldn't care less because as a matter of fact, I've got no idea who Sam Woody or Kelly are, as I've never seen Cheers because that show's too old. All collab episodes age in the modern era of watching serialized TV. They only wanted it to make sense and appeal to the audiences of 10, so they were unapologetic in their portrayal of the entire situation. Then we enter the 2000s. At this point, shows began trying to parody and appeal to stuff the audience may experience in the coming years after the show's airing, so as to not date the episodes during the time they would theoretically air on TV. I'll discuss a great example that didn't age but is undoubtedly dated in a minute, but oh boy, some of these attempts ended up hilariously foreshadowing events that seemed like a ridiculous parody that could never happen, only for it to actually happen, ruining the original joke and unknowingly birthing a new one. 2006 30 Rock has a distinct lack of 30 Rocks. Get your facts straight, NBC! This show follows a group of people who basically do a satire of Saturday Night Live. So naturally they started writing in ridiculous show concepts such as the one in the episode MILF Island, where a reality show involving mummies and kids in a survivor-like scenario gets ridiculously good ratings. But have you heard of the 2022 reality TV show MILF Manor, which involves the ridiculous concept of a reality show involving mummies and their children, who at least are thankfully adults, in a bachelor-like scenario? Great job, 30s Rock. You predicted the future! Now please predict me $1 million next. So there's totally examples that age, but in the sense that they are dated rather than actually uncomfortable or strange to watch. And these are my favorite examples of episodes that aged bad, because despite still being funny and entertaining to watch, they would literally not exist if they were made at any other time, because the conflict or technology would be completely different. Take Seinfeld's The Chinese Restaurant, which hinges on the character waiting for a table at a Chinese place before they can go watch a special screening of a terrible movie. As they wait, George has issues trying to call someone on the payphone as it is always busy. This episode is actually a great window into the culture and space of the show's production environment, because in the modern times, phones make waiting easier. One would make that entire side plot irrelevant. Home deliveries are the status quo, and it's relatively easy to find any show or film you want online. Yes, even that one. One of my favorite Icarly episodes falls into this category, and it mostly aged well aside from the one part where some kid is tickling his own feet, which take it away, Spencer! His laugh tells it all. It's almost as fake as Mr. Beast's videos. Hey, you know whose videos are real? This episode is about the Icarly crew trying to beat a not Guinness World Record. Unrelated, but I love how Icarly fakes 2007 web design. It's somehow spot on, but still completely unbelievable. Anyways, they are aiming to beat the longest uninterrupted broadcast world record by staying live for just over 24 hours, which is now considered a funny challenge for streamers to try it rather than anything impressive, with the current Guinness World Record being a pathetic 624 hours that have easily been beaten by people who don't even apply to get one of these crappy records. Heck, in this episode they specify that they have to be awake for the duration of the stream in order for the record to count, but just recently some guy decided to fuck himself for the next 5 years by staying awake for 264 hours, which is streamed live, ultimately making the conflict of this episode basically child's play in the current space of the internet. And yet, you gotta admire that. I've been dealing with this curse since 2007, when this episode first aired. As I was saying, what's great about Icarly is that it's a prime example of understanding the times in which it premiered and using a soft prediction of the environment it tackles, being the internet, so that the show wouldn't perceivably age at any point in which the network would air its episodes. But you naturally encounter instances of inaccuracy and mistakes that were new wave sci-fi ideas for a few years until proven incorrect. You also encounter times where they predicted the culture and space perfectly and thus haven't aged beyond portraying outdated technology. Heck, if I'm playing devil's advocate, I'm 1. Taking your soul, 2. Cheating, and 3. Looking at situations where writers miss the mark completely on their predictions, such as through the future episode trope, where shows skip 10 or 20 years in the future for an episode to toy with the idea of the characters being older in a world that will most likely never look like the writers envisioned it. And I think there is still enjoyment to be had from these examples because they still keep that thought experiment aspect to them that can be hilarious, endearing, and vague. It's like glimpsing into an alternate universe where things make even less sense. I think it's more important for writers to remember that they will age than to prioritize an accurate prediction. Besides, most future episodes happen on shows that have run long enough for the writers to have run out of ideas. So you may ask yourself, well, how did I get here? No, you may ask yourself why exactly this matters. And why are sitcoms concerned with getting dated besides just ratings alone? Because although those ratings play a definite part, there's an even more clear-cut reason why sitcoms will never escape the fact that they are aging. And it all comes down to genre. Sitcoms by nature are slice-of-life shows, where you as the audience member follow the characters through a slice of their day-to-day lives, whether it's them struggling to get a job or trying to use their future vision powers mischievously. Even if they are going far into ridiculous paranormal motifs, the fact remains that sitcoms are built of characters, dialogue, and scenario, three elements that are associated in some way or another with relatability. The characters feel the most real if they exist in a context that you'd immediately recognize, the present, so to speak. And no matter what they do or what they try, there are pieces of media that are structurally synced with the context of the world outside. And thus, they will all inevitably date themselves. Golden Girls is a show about ladies in their 50s, not their 80s, you whippersnappers. Don't you see they are still spring flowers? I swear these young'uns these days. I can't understand half of the show's comedy. I'm 22 years old, which means I was born during the 2000s, and my experience when I sit down to try to watch The Golden Girls, premiered 1985, is miserable, as I cannot fundamentally comprehend why any of it is supposed to be funny. The jokes are built on the idea that people had at the 80s of people who grew up in the 40s, so having about 60 years of separation as well as several generations, the show comes across as something that was good and isn't anymore. We talked about I Love Lucy a while ago, and that one began even earlier, but features jokes that weren't designed around a specific stereotype for a specific group during release. The concept of a target audience wasn't nearly as complex as it eventually became, leading to shows created under the understanding of that complexity, falling relatively flat to audiences that can't link the timely stereotypes with their own experience. That's a mouthful. TLDR, no, grandma, we are not putting a marginalized group into an island and bombing it. But see, I can understand the appeal of Golden Girls, and know that its age doesn't mean it's immediately unenjoyable to everyone. This is not a critique saying that Golden Girls is bad, just that it might not stick landing if its age shows too much with the audience member. It can be funny for many people, because at the very least, it's not the Big Bang Theory. It's 2024. And the second I decide to watch any random clip of the Big Bang Theory, I'll be running on the floor, plugging my ears at the magnitude of shit I was just assaulted with the millisecond the first quote-unquote joke is processed by my poor, struggling brain that does not deserve this.
If I push any harder, I'm gonna give birth to my colon.
Right. They're threatening me with taking a shit even more evident by putting it visually front and center just to spite me, those motherfuckers! It just didn't age well. It sucks now. Half of the jokes are not funny and the other half are trying to make jokes out of nerds in that specific time or stereotypes, but completely unsuccessfully, and thus a lot of the joke's criticism will fall onto that, which means that some of its fans like assuming that every negative critique was written by an offended nerd, when the truth is far simpler. The writing is bad. It could have been pretty funny at the time, but generally speaking, the writing is painful. And I can prove it. All you gotta do is turn to the British live-action sitcom The IT Crowd, where about as many of the jokes, if not more, are made at the expense of nerds, except for the fact that they are actually funny. Because if there's one thing about a sitcom that cannot age, is good writing, as the definition of good writing includes either giving the required context or being timeless, and The IT Crowd certainly isn't timeless. It has so many jokes about early internet culture, 2000s company operations, it's just that the show's characters, dialogue, and scenarios have been crafted successfully. They paint a picture of the company's finances, the characters discuss stuff that they themselves establish, and the characters, while being nerds, are mostly portrayed like regular introverts who are into weird stuff. Compare that to Big Bang Theory, which tries to convince you of its characters' awkwardness through their outfits and speech patterns, which you wouldn't click with easily unless you watch it specifically when the writers wanted you to. It's lazy, but most of all it showcases front and center why the best sitcoms revel not in showing the audience the world they both exist in, but rather immersing the audience into believing the world show is the real world. The best sitcoms fictionalize and establish reality in ways so subtle that you are unlikely to even realize they are establishing these things instead of assuming you'd know the context under the pretense that you logically would. My brain grew 3 sizes today, you guys. I don't know why I suddenly started speaking in unrotted brain functionality. If I could be allowed, let me point out an example of a show that does this masterfully. I picked a random episode and sat down to watch it all over again. Let's briefly analyze Baby Shower from The Office. In this episode, Michael throws a baby shower for his ex-girlfriend's unborn child, who as it turns out is already born when she gets to the party. It's one of those premises that feel very awkward, as it is typical of The Office and its humor. Now, luckily I happened to land on an episode where you get a glimpse at something that helps make the characters realistic, and that is the presence of an arc. Michael throughout the show has this specific arc about wanting to be a parent for some reason, and this episode gives a lot of clarity on that aspect. Which, while not necessary for a fantastic sitcom, it does make for better character construction. Character arcs don't age as easily. But notice this, Almost all of the technology and environment is designed with care to transmit as much information about this work office as possible, from the computers on display, the decorations on the wall, to the very arrangement of the room. It's messy and gives off the appearance of a disorganized workplace in the 2000s. You get a clear picture of what the life of the characters is, so you can understand why there are no gender reveals explosion at the party. Look at me dating myself with a joke. A great part of this example is how Pam and Jim's very brief side plot sees them going through challenges of a long-distance relationship, which in the modern day involve a lot more pictures of your partner naked and getting nervous when you show your friends memes because you're not sure if you did delete all those compromising pictures of yourself from your gallery, and yet the show's framing is enough to transmit the issues the audience would expect they'd experience under the rules it established. Similarly, shows like Sunny in Philadelphia or Malcolm in the Middle don't show you the world they live in, they instead work as timepieces of their own times, hence why Malcolm in the Middle seems so 2000s and why Sunny in Philadelphia still feels fresh despite running for over 16 seasons. The running involves some beautifully set up scenarios that consider the future will require the context of now, as it no longer will be, resulting in the creation of this seamless portal to another time, painting a picture of the absurdity of real life when the show was in its prime, and doing it in a way that is fun and digestible, even when they aren't trying to be art, because Malcolm and Sunny definitely have their examples. They are art. Really, sitcoms exactly that, shows that juxtapose the mundane life of the characters and the ridiculous situations they may be in, and it's their natural inclination to these contexts that give them that rust that can ever be so appealing if it's understood accordingly. Aging badly is always seen as a bad thing, but it doesn't have to be, because many shows learned how to make aging part of its personality and style, leading to truly special results, something that you could only do with sitcoms. Ultimately, all it takes is a show's ingenuity to turn the issue on its head, make it into a threat, and fucking run with it. Who'd ever expect that aging badly could be good? And it's been 5 seconds since this video ended, and due to the rules of the internet, it's already dated, old, and stupid. Great! Not great. I keep crying myself to sleep every night.